I will say every year we do this, it's a very special night for Absolute. It's a night for us to say thank you to you for being part of our family. I was telling Michelle the other day, when I came to the States 15 years ago, I got my first cell phone, and I had 3 contacts on it: home, office, and Drew. Tonight we're in a room with 200 people, and I'd like to personally thank every single one of you for being our family so far away from home. And I'd like to applaud that. Thank you. Now, my challenge with this meeting... Oh, we had one more raffle, apparently. So the Care Foundation, we had to choose how many teeth were in the raffle. Oh. So you had to get the closest teeth in, and this is for a donation to our Care Foundation. What does all that scribbling mean? Oh, okay. Dr. Aziz, you were very close. Dr. Wood, you were not close at all. Dr. Schaefer, you were very close. Dr. Barker, very close. But Dr. Susan Wilson, right on the money, 200 teeth in the jar, and she wins $250 off your next crown with Absolute. All right, now we can start. If you can raise your hand, there we go. Now, last year, you'll remember we had a golf outing with Conrad, and it sounded like such a good idea at the time, and somebody won it and never claimed it. So I'm not sure what that means. Nobody wants to play golf with me. So we scratched it this year. So that is still valid if anybody is interested. So my challenge with these meetings every year is to honor your time by at least having you go home with a little bit of information you can use in your practice. And hopefully, we've been able to do that through the years. Now, this year, I think, was probably the easiest year when it comes to information. There's so much new information that I can share with you tonight. And it's all based around digital, how digital technology is influencing our industry and how it's about to change how we do things going forward. I truly believe that the dental industry is on the threshold of seeing huge change when it comes to digital impression, especially intraoral digital impression taking. And the reason for that is we finally got to a point where we can integrate that with the lab. Now, I'll tell you what's in your handouts there. We're going to talk a little bit on CONUS at the end of the presentation. There's a protocol manual in there that I wrote with Dentsply to walk you through what we're going to discuss tonight. And then we talk a little bit about fixed hybrids, especially cobalt chrome layered ceramic fixed hybrids. We did an article with Dentsply, and that article I had printed out and in the folders explains step by step the processing as we go through these fixed hybrids. I also have a protocol manual, so if you're interested, just let us know. And tonight, like I said, I want to talk about digital, but not just digital technology, but digital and technology. I think technology now is going to show us different ways of doing things that we've been doing for the longest time and show us how easy this is. The reason for this integration and the reason I think things are going to change rapidly in our industry, and it might be time to consider purchasing digital equipment to do intraoral scanning, is the fact that we've now seen full integration with the lab. If you had a digital impression machine a year ago, and you didn't have an in-office mill, the difference for the lab was that we received a model from 3M or we received a model from Sheraton instead of pouring a model ourselves. Now, if we wanted to use that model, we had to redigitize it in one of our 3-shape scanners, and then we could process everything digitally from that point. But it slowed us down so much, we had better models, we had better margins, but we couldn't get the integration right. By the time we had everything redigitized, we've lost almost 3 or 4 days versus what we would have done if we did it the analog way. So now we have integration. Within the next probably 60 days, I believe we're going to see full integration. Up to this point, Sheraton was closed architecture. Everybody that had a scanning system or DICOM data kept it for themselves because that's how they could control selling the models or doing the designs. 3-shape, everything had to come into a 3-shape. From this point on, STL files are going to become the norm. And that's going to help us to be able to integrate any data that you send us from an intraoral scanner of your choice. And I'm going to show you tonight how we can use that to do things more efficiently. And then digital impressions with lab integration. I wrote a little manual. It's a purple manual that's in there, showing you the services we offer through digital impressions. Now you got to remember, when you send us a digital impression, the difference is there's no pickup, there's no disinfecting, there's no model pouring, there's no dye trim, there's no articulation. We go straight to fabricating the case. And that saves us almost 4 days in a lab, in some cases 5 days. It's not just efficiency there, but it gives us a much better product. There's no models dropped, there's no chip margins, there's no short dye trimming. And the most important thing I'm going to show you tonight, I think, is communication. I know most clinicians, if not all, want a lab technician right next to them. They don't want them there all the time, but they want them there when they need them. This technology is going to give us the ability to be in your office with the patient in the chair, looking at the impressions as you're doing it, discussing where we're going to go. And that's kind of what we're going to discuss tonight and hopefully shed some light on that. And then zirconia. Zirconia is the one material for the last 10, 11 years that everybody has been pushing. We stood on the same, I stood on the same stage maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and I touted zirconia. Don't do any more PFMs. The problem with zirconia was that it was a functional material. You put it in the mouth, it looked like a white block of chalk that we put in there. It was very strong. And with the introduction of our new lines of zirconia, the new premium high translucency zirconias, we finally have a product that is rivaling, if not surpassing, Emax. If you ask me if I would ever say there would be a better material than Emax on the market 2 years ago, I would have told you it would never happen. In the last few weeks, or last few months actually, we did 3 full rehab cases. We did them in Emax and we did them in Envision zirconia. In all 3 cases, without identifying the cases to the clinicians or the patients, in all 3 cases, the clinician and the patient chose Envision over Emax. Now that tells you that we've come a long way with the development of this material, and we're going to touch on that a little bit as well. Now there's a lot of question about in vitro wear. Is this going to wear the opposing? So what I did is I took a few abstracts. This one I've got here is about 8 years old, was done in I believe it was in Korea. And I found some abstracts done in 2013 and 2014. Now we'll say I was in a bit of a rush, so I put them in there, I cut them into a Word document, and yesterday I called Russ and I said, I hope none of these abstracts actually says that zirconia is bad for wearing on opposing teeth. So I had Russ read it, and he said it looked like all those things. So if you read it, make sure that that is what it says, and if it doesn't say what we want it to say, like most people do, just throw it away and pretend like you didn't read it. But it is true today that the new zirconias have enamel wear less than normal enamel wear rate. So it's very soft, very kind on opposing incision. So a lot of the initial questions we had with the 1500 megapascal zirconias are no longer an issue. So technology, and I think this is where we got to start tonight, is look at technology and kind of see why do we need to pay attention to technology, and maybe learn from history why technology can either be our best friend or our biggest enemy. I read this one day, and they said if you go back 160 million years, we had big reptiles, Tyrannosaurus rex, running around on Earth, and you had little fluffy bunnies, which were the mammals. And Tyrannosaurus rex was squashing and eating the bunnies until the asteroid hit the Earth, and things changed. The bunnies were able to adapt, and they accepted what was going on. The reptiles couldn't adapt and change fast enough. And today, that fluffy bunny is standing in front of you on a stage. So I think it's important that we look at technology and discern, when is it time to pull the trigger. The biggest thing for us is if we do it too quickly, we pay for it. We want to be the leading edge, not the bleeding edge. And sometimes in the lab industry, it's very easy for us to become the bleeding edge because we want to be the first one to market. We want to be the first lab who gives you that technology. Drew and I have been really careful not to make that mistake. So I want to let you know tonight, everything and every product I'm going to show you, and every process we use to process that specific product will go in my own mouth. Not made by me, but made by my team. And I think that's the criteria that we've used and always been successful. Quality first, and I think everything else from that point follows. So technology used to be art and skill, cunning of hand. Nowadays, in a lab, it's more than just art and skill. I think it's the fusion of our art and technology. So we have great ceramists, great technicians, and they are the reason I'm standing here. I am a technician by trade. I am a ceramist, but I cannot hold a candle or a brush to what these guys can do. It used to be very easy in our industry. When I started doing this 25 years ago, if you could make good teeth that just looked like teeth, the margins were closed, the contacts were there, and you had good service, your lab would excel. It was very easy to do business because you either had good technicians that are bad businessmen or good businessmen that were bad technicians. And I think that's why Drew and I have been so successful. I've always liked the business aspect of things. He's always been the artist. Now, there's a third facet to what we do now, and that's technology. A dental lab today that doesn't stay abreast of new technology is going to fall behind. Not just fall behind, but not be competitive in the market of quality, efficiency, and turnaround times. And I think that's the three things that technology is going to afford us. And I'm going to try to show you that tonight. So let's look at technology. Why is it such a dangerous or such a strong ally to have? If you think about linear technology, cell phones took forever, was the size of a brick, and then it was the size of a small brick, and then it was the size of a smaller brick. I still remember my neighbor came in with a car phone, and I couldn't believe somebody can actually talk on a phone in a car. It was the best day of my life. He walked out with a suitcase the size of what bank robbers used, with a cell phone underneath it. And then we got to cell phones, and from that point on we had flip phones, and then we had smartphones. And then it took off crazy because technology went from linear to exponential. So if you look at linear steps, if we take 30 steps linear, we get 30 meters, 90 feet. I can make it to the other side of this room. If technology goes exponential, which means it's been set, there's a value, people see the need for that technology, that's when things go exponential. 30 exponential steps equates to 1 billion meters, orbiting the Earth 26 times. Now that's the difference between linear technology and exponential technology. I will make a statement tonight, and you can tell me I was wrong next year or the year after if I'm blessed enough to stand on this stage. Technology in the dental industry is about to go exponential. The problem with exponential technology is when you try to play catch up, it's too late to get on the curve. If you can get in at the right time and use the right technology, you can grow with that technology. And Absolute tonight is going to be committed to help you to navigate the way through that. Now let's look at what this does to business. The effect of exponential technology growth, and this is by a Yale professor, it's not something I came up with. In 1920, the average S&P 500 company had a lifespan of 67 years. In year 2000, the average lifespan was 15 years. And that's because companies become obsolete because they do not stay abreast of technology. In 2020, 75% of the S&P will consist of companies that's not even in existence today. That's not far along. And in 2025, 40% of today's S&P 500 companies, the 500 largest, most successful companies in the country, will no longer exist. Blockbuster, Kodak. These are all companies who weren't able to change at the right time and change fast enough. Now, talk about Kodak. In '96, Kodak had 140,000 employees, 28 billion market cap, and controlled 90% of the film industry in the United States, and probably a lot of that in the world. The problem for Kodak was that they were the first company who owned the technology for a digital camera. I read on John Sasson, who came up with this technology. In 1976, the camera weighed 8.5 pounds and had 0.01 megapixels. So the camera wasn't something that they could sell. The meeting between the CEO and John Sasson went like this: how long will it take before this technology will become a threat? They figured that from 0.01 megapixels, they needed to get to 1 megapixel to make this technology worthwhile. They figured out linearly it would take about 10 to 15 years for technology to be able to give us 1 megapixel worth of clarity. Clarity is not the right word. Anyway, what they didn't realize was with exponential technology growth, this happened within 6 years. They came to 1 million, and then things went exponential. So if we look at the first supercomputer in 1970, now just think, I was born in 1970. I know it was hard to believe, but I was born in 70. That was the first supercomputer that was ever designed. It had 8 megs of memory. It weighed 5.5 tons and cost $5.5 million. Now, one thing this computer had that nobody else had was seating for 5, but it couldn't call home. Now, think about today. The average smartphone is 1 million times cheaper than that computer. It's 1,000 times more powerful. The problem is you can call home, but you got no place to sit. So technology sometimes leaves things in the past, but also generates things going forward. So the top applications on a smartphone, just to let you know, and the reason a smartphone is so relevant today, it drives technology. Everything that anybody comes up with today is communicated across the world, and that leads to exponential technology growth. Today, if one of you come up with a great way to do something, the next study club meeting, 7 people know, then 15 people know, then 30 people know, and 60. And that's where technology is so relevant. So all these technologies today, if they were launched today, GPS, digital voice recorder, is worth almost $1 million. And all that technology today is free. Can you imagine a TomTom? Only 5-6 years ago, everybody had a TomTom. I don't even think you sell a Tom. You can buy a TomTom today because it's all incorporated into your phone. And that's the difference with technology. That's what's so important to make sure that we stay abreast of it. So mainstream systems for digital impression. So let's get into the digital aspect. For the last 10 years, I remember when Dr. Aker bought the first 3M scanner. He would take a digital impression. We would make a crown. It wouldn't fit. He would take 2 PVS impressions. He would take another digital impression. It wouldn't fit. And we would all get a $100 gift card from 3M. I had so many $100 gift cards in my car, I didn't know what to do with them. I walked into Walmart and just bought stuff I didn't need. That's where we were only, Dr. Aker, 6-7 years ago, 8 years ago, and we bore through it. The one thing we know today is that it's accurate. We have tested and double tested intraoral scanners. I can stand here and I can tell you it doesn't matter which one you buy, there's different aspects on the back end of it, but they all give us decent data to work off. So the difference between oral cameras today, and it's very hard for me to speak because as I'm telling you about this, technology is changing on the back end. So if I tell you today, I think the Trios is the best camera, I will bet you 3 or 4 months from now, it's probably not the best camera out because somebody else has copied what that offers plus added something new to it. The difference is where we are today, these cameras are offering us enough technology to be able to say, if I buy a camera today, it's going to be good for at least 3 or 4 years until I really need to upgrade. Unfortunately, with technology, the one thing we cannot fight is that technology will always get better, which means as soon as you invest, it's old technology. But today, we're far enough along that it's worth to pull that trigger and get in. So what you see orally versus what you see on your screen orally or in the office is not always the same thing. And that's where it becomes a little harder and maybe something to consider before you buy this equipment. So let's look at lab data processing. There are hundreds of different systems. And you can see this is the OmniCam that creates color. Then you get the 3-shape Trios, which is true color. And we'll talk about what the differences are. You get the Itero. We've got Itero and we've got Trios here tonight, which is created images. Now, they all are different. We can work on them. And then you get Carestream, which is monochromatic. So the difference for a lab technician is the data that we see. As things progress, I think this would become a general picture. Things would be more the same than what it is. So there's a bit of a difference between what we as the lab technicians see. The other difference is for you as clinicians is the actual size of the wand. Now, you can imagine how much fun these companies have with talking about the wand size. The one with the smallest wand is always the best. It's not. You have to look at the technology. Yeah, that's kind of weird to say the smallest one is the best. I shouldn't go there. So I got really sidetracked on that one. So, but don't let that fool you. It's very important that the one that you use is comfortable in your hand. And that's what's important. We'll talk about that just a little bit. So one size, is it a pen or a handle shape? And that is truly what you feel comfortable. Data transfer and cleanup speed. You got to remember, you have to discern how do you want to use this. If you want to do a lot of immediate temporization, if you want to do sedated patients and have the crowns delivered back to you in less than 2 hours, we need immediate data transfer, which means if you have a system that requires data cleanup, that will take 8 hours. By the time that data cleanup is obviously in our lab, it'll be too late to do immediate crowns. So it's important to always ask, how long before my lab has this data? Whatever I'm shooting chairside needs to be available as soon as possible, and I think that helps. Imaging to the lab, talk to your lab technician, which means us. What do we need or what do we prefer? And then additional features. There's a lot of really cool features being added to these cameras. Additional features, shade taking, high definition cameras. So these are things that are being built in as this technology progresses. And then Web Connect. The biggest change in our industry is going to be Web Connect. Allow me to be in your office and discuss the case before you let that patient go, before you put your temporary on. Looking from the lingual side, making sure there's enough clearance. There's nothing as bad as getting a phone call from Matt that says we can't see the margin. I can absolutely stand here tonight and guarantee you, you will never, ever get a call to call a patient back in for a new impression if you have this technology and use it correctly. Now, I think the big mistake a lot of clinicians make is how much money am I going to save by buying this over PVS? So you run the numbers, I use $500 worth of PVS in a month or a year, the machine is going to cost me this much. A good rule of thumb is one of these machines on a 5-year lease with all the licensing and everything else, and it could be off a few dollars, is about $1,000 a month expense. Those of you who have it, you agree, disagree, I think it's around about there. Now, if you look at $1,000, you take away the PVS you don't have to do, and you look at the product savings, and we'll talk about products a little bit, and then you talk about time savers. If there's 3 or 4 patients a month that you have to bring back because you have to redefine a margin, didn't have enough clearance, or there's something wrong with the impression, or we just simply lose an impression. Let me rephrase that. The competition loses an impression. We don't lose impressions at absolute. But if something like that should happen, everything is archived. If a crown breaks 2 years down the line, you don't ever get the patient back in for a new impression. You call the lab, you tell us the crown broke, we do a new one, we make a new one, print the model, and we deliver the crown before the patient comes. Patient comes, you cut the old crown off and put a new one on. So there's a lot of small things I think we're stepping over and not seeing where the real true value lies in this equipment. So full integration between lab and clinician. Now look at this. This is a monochromatic image on a Trios. The newest camera, the Trios 3, is true color. So it gives us the ability to work in the mouth. Now another feature, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, is we can blow this up. Now if you think about that, that's probably about a 5-foot image of a molar design, and we can trim that. So the definition on these cameras are so good that we can come in, we can communicate. So you have a patient in the chair, you're not sure about what we've got. You hit the team viewer, Web Connect, computer opens up, and we're communicating about that case. Now that's not as relevant on single crowns. Most of you have this covered. When we're doing big cases, that's where this technology really comes to light. So look at a normal image, a created image, and then look at what we can do now when we import, hit the wrong button there. If we import a high definition image over it. So the Trios has the ability to take a high definition image and overlay it over your scan, which means we're working on a high definition image. And I'm throwing some brand names out there. Every system has a different feature, and I'm just highlighting a few of them. So you can see what we've got here is basically a high definition picture overlaid over the oral scan. So what I'm working on lab side is what you saw in the mouth, an actual picture of the tooth. And that makes it very easy for us to establish the margin. The newer systems have automatic shade mapping. So what it does is it takes a high definition picture and it shade maps. Remember the old Vida shade system where you hold it up against the tooth and it gives you a shade reading and it's never right? Dr. Ferry and them had some big machine, I still believe. Dr. Ferry, you still around? You still have that machine? Dr. Ferry told me one day the greatest part of this machine was it was about 200 pounds, and I'm exaggerating, had a big cart, you push it in, and the patients would go, wow, you take shades with that thing, and then he would take the shade, throw it away, and we'll take a shade afterwards. So there was is that kind of how it went, Dr. Ferry? I don't want to put words in you. It was pretty good. I'm just kidding. So how effective is this going to be? We'll need to see, but there's a way we can use this technology, even though this might not be a B2, B2, C1. It gives us a good measurement of what we're looking for. Now, this is what I want to do tonight. I want to tie all of this up and kind of show you the practical uses if we think a little bit about what technology gives us. Now, if you look at the little booklet I wrote, we have a same-day crown fabrication and custom shade matching service. Now, what we do now is you take an impression, comes to the lab, we pour a model, you take us a base shade, or the patient comes over, we take a base shade, create the crown, send it back, you take the temp off, put the crown in, patient comes back, we custom stain, goes back to you, and you seat the crown. Now, that's when we have a patient where we know it's going to be a tough shade match. Now, let's use this technology and do the same thing. When you prep the patient, and obviously we need just a little bit heads up notice to do this. You prep the patient, you take us a shade with the digital equipment or with the normal machine, doesn't matter what you do. You send this to us, we have the data available immediately. You start making your temp, and we start cutting the crown out of a lucite crystal. The patient comes straight to the lab. We put that crown in the mouth, we custom stain it, and we send the patient back to you. One appointment, one day, no shade foo-foos. Now that helps us to become more efficient. We need a little heads up. You send the patient over. We can now guarantee single front teeth, one delivery, one appointment, same day. The nice thing about this technology is that it's not putting unnecessary pressure on the lab. Remember I told you in the beginning, every service that I'm going to show you tonight is something that I would do in my own mouth or do in my mom's mouth. There's no sacrifice of quality. Everything we do on these are going to be checked on a model, made sure the margins are correct, and then the custom staining is being done the way it is now. So your patient comes back and you deliver the crown. Let's look at this case. We do 3 crowns. It's a distal extension, no terminal stop. So pretty simple case. Can become very tough if we do PVS impressions and we can't get a good bite. So look at what we did. We digitized, this was done with the OmniCam, well this was actually the Blue Cam. We designed 3 crowns, very easy. The bite is taken very effectively, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Now the crowns are fabricated. Now what's the biggest nemesis we deal with? The one both you and I hate to deal with. That's a partial and a crown under a partial. The patients don't want to give it up. They want to give half their teeth away. We need it for 2 days. You want to give it to us for 1 day. It's always this argument. Did you send it? Did you not send it? Why would you send it? And why didn't you want to send it? So look at what we can do now when we work with Sirona. You scan your teeth. After you prep, you put the partial in, and you scan the partial. So if you look at the top, that's done with an OmniCam. This is the older style Blue Cam. We now have our partial on our model, and it gives us exactly the position where the partial is in relationship to your prep. We digitally create our crowns. We're able now to look through translucent levels that the crown is actually touching the partial everywhere where it should. We have our bite done digitally. Everything is done from that point on. And look at the integration on this crown without touching it. The great thing is, it was done 3 hours after the shade, or after the impression was taken, the digital impression was taken. The partial never left the patient's mouth. This patient was never even temporized because we were able to do it in a 3-hour turnaround. Now that brings value. Those are the small things that pays for this equipment long term. Now where we are today is these kind of services are accurate. I will tell you, it's not available with all the systems yet, but this is kind of the things that you need to investigate a little bit, and these are the type of things that's going to get better. So I want to show you how one of these scans actually takes place. This is the new Trios 3. Ross, if I can get this to, There we go. Excuse the music. It's kind of a blend between Elevator and I don't know what else, where they found this. So you can see he's going to scan in a continuous motion where it used to be a very slow process. Now don't look at the guy, look at the screen. I know. That's why this music is like that. I shouldn't say that. So you can see the lower arch is finished. He flips the wand around. But you can see how quickly this camera picks up all the imaging. So no more is it a slow process going around. You literally pull it over the teeth and it digitizes everything. Look at the palatal digitizing. Look how quickly it picks up the palate. Now you can see in about 32 seconds the upper arch is done, plus the lower arch. And now we're going to look at the bite, make sure that everything is there where it needs to be. And he just shoots the facial part of the intercusp. And that's going to articulate the case. So now the case is mounted, and this is data cleanup. Now on the Trios 2, this took about 12 to 15 minutes to clean up the data. In this case, I think it takes about 8 seconds. So within 8 seconds of finalizing the digital scan, I have that scan in the lab. Now obviously this is exaggerated, but a total of 51 seconds, upper and lower, fully digitized and sent off to the lab. So that makes a big difference. Now, when you do this, obviously your assistant will do most of the scan, and then we will come in and do the prep and take it from there. Now look at this case. We did this case with Dr. Jeff Cunningham, and I told him I'm going to tell you this because what we did was we prepped the case. We're going to open it up. He did a great job on prepping this case. And the three aspects we need is obviously good preparations. And then the toughest part is transferring those good preparations over to the lab. You can do the best preparations. Okay? You can do the best preparations, but how do you communicate that with the lab? Any bubble, any void, any fold in that impression is potentially going to be a problem. Now, if you look at his impression, he did a very good job, but caught a few bubbles right in the sulcus areas, which meant he had to retake and full arch impression and send that to us. So how many hours of work was that? Dr. Jeff on the second time around got it absolutely perfect. But that's something that you never have to deal with when you do digital. So we poured it up, he made some temps, and the way we take these bites, obviously most of you are familiar with it, make the temps in 3 sections, take out the left quadrant, take the bite, put those temps back, take out the right quadrant, take those temps, put them back, and then take the anterior. So we have 3 sectional bites that all match up by the time we go to the model. Now, for those of you who've done this, as soon as that patient slides, you have 3 bites who doesn't match up, which means you start all over. So there's a lot of things that can go wrong with these big cases. And when do you pay for this? And when do we pay for this? The day of delivery. When the bite's off, or everything is out, the incisal edge is wrong because we missed something at this stage. I can stand here tonight and I can tell you, I can absolutely guarantee you with digital impressions, this does not happen. You do not take a new impression and you do not miss a bite if you follow the correct procedures. And I'm going to show you how we do this. So everything was digital. This was still an EMAX case that Drew did, deliberate, came out great. So how will we do this today? And what's the difference when we do these big cases? Monday morning, at 7:45, Dr. Chris Martin is going to do a full upper rehab. We're going to digitize the case. And on Wednesday afternoon, if all goes well, I'm going to be out of town, fortunately, if it doesn't go well. We're going to deliver a full upper rehab. And I will tell you, I will be surprised if he is going to touch more than 2 contact points and have to adjust the occlusion. Big promises. Now, fortunately, by next year, everybody would have forgotten that I said that. So if it doesn't go that well, nobody would know. So what we have, but I'm very confident that this is something that we can do. So if you look at the digital impression, we now have Team Viewer. We can come in before you release the patient, and we can look at this together and decide what we're going to do. How are we going to do this? How are we planning the case? What type of materials to use? And what we need. Now, you can also see we can identify and blow up every die individually. And we're working off high-definition images. So it's very easy for me to call Dr. Chris and say, I can't see this margin. Where are we going to go with this? Where did you prep it? Now, the fact that it's in true color makes a huge difference because we can distinguish between tissue and tooth structure. And that's really helpful when the data that comes into the lab is not monochromatic. That makes a huge difference for us on how we work. So how will we do this? We're going to prep this case. We're going to prep 3 teeth in the left quadrant. We're going to digitize those 3 teeth and save it as our bite. Going to prep 3 teeth on the right side with the temps in on the other side or the bite registration, and we're going to digitize that relationship. So we're going to digitize the preps to the opposing on the left side. Before we destroy the vertical stops or the anteriors, we're going to prep 3 teeth on the other side and digitize that as our left bite. What this machine needs is only 2 sections of bite to be able to mount the case. As long as those 6 teeth that we prep first are completely finished, you can't rough prep them and do the bite. You have to finish them off. Then what we'll do is we'll go back and finish the entire case, digitize the upper arch, digitize the lower arch, and then the machine will automatically put this back in centric. You can't miss the bite. Obviously, Matt is going to be there very early to make sure that this goes as planned. But it's a very simple, very predictable. The 2 things we struggle with the most, a good impression and losing vertical, with this equipment becomes a no-brainer. Now, everything is into our 3Shape design software digitally. We don't mismount in the lab. We don't drop the bite. We don't lose the bite. Everything that you digitized is going to come into the lab exactly the way you intended it to. So we do the other side, and now we have the bites ready to process the case. So we go in, and nothing changes here. You can choose your articulator. You can set your condyles. You do everything the way we're used to doing, except everything is now done in virtual reality. So if you look at the right, here's our design file. From that, we design our crowns in the correct vertical, send it to our milling units, and prep the case and deliver. So very predictable, step by step, very few sequence issues that can come to place. 2 things you need to make sure of: the bite is correct and the impression is accurate. And those are things you can go back. Now, there's a few features on the system as well that helps. So complex cases, one of the services we're going to offer is coming to help with these complex cases. We want to make sure that we get this done and get it done the first time. And we'll talk about that a little bit with our alliance that I'm going to introduce to you tonight. So if we look at single crowns, it's very easy for us now to look at margins together. Actually, you don't even need me in there because you know what a margin should look like, and you know if you can see that margin on screen. So it's easy to know I need to re-impress. If you have associates, young associates, it's very easy to go in, make sure that you're happy with what's going on, and get the standard of the practice all the same. Accurate evaluation of lingual clearance. I cannot tell you how many times Matt gets on the phone and says, we don't have enough lingual clearance. I can't tell you how many times the answer is, I'm sure there was enough lingual clearance. The problem is you can't see there, we can. So with this machine, you don't have to worry, but you flip the model over and you can look at the lingual clearance. I don't know what's going on. There's some stuff coming out of my mouth that shouldn't be tonight. And then we've got accurate bite registrations. Now think of this. In general, a bite is not a big deal if we have a terminal stop. We really struggle with these free end extensions. You're doing 31 to 29. It's a very simple bridge. The argument that Mark Scaria has had with me for the last 15 years is full arch impressions. Is Mark Scaria still here? Oh, I thought you left, Mark. Mark said he's going to leave. Scratch that. I'm just kidding. So So we've had a big argument in our industry, I think, since I started doing this. Full arch models versus quarter arch models. 6, 7 years ago, Dr. David Hall is here. He called me and said, Conrad, I'm going to start doing triple trays. And I thought, how can you say that? Nowadays, 99% of what we do is triple trays, and it's super accurate. Where we struggle with a triple tray is the bite. Now, when you have a free end extension and there's no terminal stop, it's very tough for us, especially with implant cases. Now, you can imagine if we miss that bite by a 0.5 millimeter over closed, you're going to grind for 40 minutes on that case. If we open it, the patient's out of occlusion, temps back on, send it back to the lab, redo it, patient reimpressed. You've just justified this machine with 4 or 5 of those cases. That's where the value lies in digital impression. These small issues that we're dealing with today, we can eradicate, and we can eradicate them efficiently. So as we talked about, the machine takes about 3 teeth and looks at the intercusp position when the patient's incentric. It's very easy to get that patient incentric. So look at this case. We have 3 teeth mounted, and that's all the machine needed to give us an accurate mounting. So now I know my distal extension is not going to be open or closed by a 0.5 millimeter. Very quick, very efficient. Your delivery is going to be flawless. And I can guarantee you that because we're still going to work on models. Modelless dentistry is here. We do a lot of modelless same-day crowns. But when you get to these kind of cases, you always want to make sure that we double-check analog. So look at implants. What do we do with implants? When you place an implant, surgeon places an implant, he can digitize at surgery stage. The only difference at surgery versus 3 months later is the tissue contour is finalized. So that's the variable in this file. We know the hex position and the rotation of the implant is correct. Astra and most of the, or Dentsply, most of the implant companies has now released tie bases. A tie base is something that gives us the proprietary connection at the bottom with a restorable platform at the top. So it allows us to do screw-retained crowns on a proprietary base into that implant system. And that has been a great help to us because now what we can do is screw-retained temps and screw-retained finals, and we're not using components that's not authorized by the company. So our reps still support us. Everybody's happy because we can do it. So look at this. There's the digitized case. Here's our temp mold from that. And this is all same day. We deliver these cases within 180 minutes, within 2 hours after the surgery. What we do now, you got to remember, these blocks that we cut out of are very, very cost effective, very economical. This is a tri-layered Vita block, which means you've got your chroma at the bottom and you got your translucency at the top. We do this out of PMMA temps as well. But what this allows us to do is now deliver a temporary crown that's made from ceramic. Now, I know what you're thinking. Every time I show you this, you're thinking, yeah, what's this going to cost us? Technology makes things more economical. This case we did with Dr. Shep McKenzie cost $60 less. We did it in 3 hours faster turnaround than when we make it by hand. You got to remember, everything is digital, so it's cost versus what we're doing, and that makes this more efficient. So now your patient is healing up on a ceramic temp, which could be used for 6 or 8 months. You're not going to have the components snap. You can probably use this as a permanent. Obviously, we put a nice little hole through it to make sure the patient comes back for the final. But now our surgeons can deliver a ceramic temp day of surgery. And that's great for the tissue to heal up. Now look what happens. Our surgeon now has this file archived. When we go to our final, I asked Dr. Ferry and Dr. Lawrence if they would do a case with us. So this is the difference between your surgeon digitizing this case for you or digitizing it after healing. So on the left side, we have a normal case, going to digitize, and on the right side, the case that was digitized by the surgeon. The only difference is that this part of the scan might change or will change because we're contouring that tissue. So when the patient comes back to the surgeons 3 months later for post-op, they take the temp out, take the file out of archive, and redigitize the interproximal contact area and the tissue contour, puts the temp back in, and saves the file. contacts the restorative, releases the file to the lab. We fabricate everything without the restorative technique clinician ever having to take an impression. The first appointment your patient shows up is final delivery appointment. Very efficient. Now let's see how we're doing this and why this helps. So if you don't have that from your surgeon, you place your abutments, you scan it. You can see Dr. Ferry busy doing his thing. And now we go straight into our design file. So this data goes straight to design. The time the patient leaves, we're busy fabricating this case. Now it makes it even more efficient that everything is now done in parallel. We have our Atlantis design, and we stay proprietary. That's what we try to do. We always try to stay Dentsply on Dentsply, Nobel on Nobel, and make sure that we have our warranties taken care of. The same time that we design our abutments, we go to our core files, and we design our crowns off the same file. This goes to our milling units, and our crowns are effectively done about 2 days before our abutments. The abutments comes back from Atlantis, we match everything up, and our model printer gives us a model. So now the model is not the basis of fabricating the case anymore, it's actually the checking side of it. So we take the abutments, put them on the model, and fit our crowns. What's the difference? We deliver these cases in 4 days. Custom CAD abutments from Atlantis with crowns in 4 days. No pressure on the lab. A case like this is about 20% cheaper than it is if you do it the traditional way, because there's less lab steps for us to use. So very efficient, and that's where the difference comes in. So 5-day deliveries is going to be the standard of the industry. Anything we receive digital, a 5-day delivery will be a standard delivery. Expedited delivery is going to be 3 days, and a rush case, same day. Now think about this. The difference right now, if we do a 180-minute crown versus a high noble PFM crown, is about $25 more expensive for a same-day lucite crystal crown than what we charge for a PFM high noble crown. Technology is going to make us more efficient and giving you the savings, serving your patients better, faster, and more efficiently. That's the difference. Now, I want to introduce you tonight, and I've been talking about digital impressions, and it's hard for me to understand, how do you get to a point where you buy a piece of equipment that potentially hinges, or everything in your practice hinges on that equipment. And we understand that's very tough, because now you have to make a transition. I was talking to Dr. Jessica Bishop, and she said, I can take a great PVS impression every time, first time. And that's a hard sell for somebody like that, because now you have to learn a new curve. You have to learn new things. So what we did is we started the Alliance for Excellence in Dentistry. The number one basis of this is a partnership between us and you. My team and I are going to go out there, and we're going to learn the equipment. We just ordered our own triage scanner, which will arrive on the 15th, which means we can come chairside with you, and we can do the case with you. I don't want you to buy a piece of equipment and not be able to get assistance or get somebody to help you. On Monday morning, Drew and I are flying down to sunny New Jersey, and we're going to be trained as certified trainers on intraoral scanners, which means if you have a problem, we're going to be chairside. Matt's going to know how to do it. Grant's going to know how to do it. Brenda's going to. So you're going to have a support system in our lab as part of this Alliance to Excellence in Dentistry to help you through this initial curve. So our team is going to be Drew and myself. Customer support, showing you, teaching you, doing lunch and learns with your team, making sure that everybody knows which button to press, when to press it, and why to press it. And then Drew on the other side always has to make sure the product and the quality stays the same. Now, through all of this, and I know this is a lot of information, a lot of new stuff that I'm bringing out, the one thing that doesn't change is our commitment to quality. That's Dries' job. This is my job. I promise you tonight that nothing will change when it comes to quality of product that comes out of Absolute. If anything, we commit tonight to make it even better. And then our team, Jason is going to be out on the road. We have Matt on the phone, and a lot of you have never met Matt, so tonight, Matt, I put your picture up here a few times so everybody knows who you are. We got Brenda. that receives all these digital files. And then we have Grant, that's our CAD design manager. So we have a support structure that we're going to use to support you through this process. This partnership is rooted in one thing, and that's quality prosthesis. I want to make sure every crown we deliver is as good, if not better, than what we did PVS-wise, to assist you to navigate through these waters. I don't want you to go and have to learn about every nuance. If something new comes out, I didn't know about it. You find out about it 6 months ago. We have one weekly CAD meeting at Absolute where all our technicians sit around a table and I ask them one thing. If you're a clinician, knowing what you know, how would you make my life easier or your life easier? And that's what we want to bring to you as a team. Do you know that we can now do this? Do you know that we can now do that? And that's what this alliance is going to be about. And then keep you abreast of new protocols. It's important that you know what's out there. We can now do a crown in this much time, and this is how it will influence you. So if you look at the doors there, I had my digital, or my designer design these marketing posters or marketing brochures for your patients. So everything here is going to be customized. There's place for your lab, for your name, for your clinic, your practice name, and we can design these to suit you. When you buy one of these in-house mills, they give you the marketing. They make sure that people know that you're offering this. You can now offer same-day crowns, and you can decide as a clinician how much of that do you want to or not want to get into. What is your level of comfort, and how do you like to practice? And we're going to try to help you with that through this. So predictable marginal fit, exceptional aesthetics, prosthetics with longer warranties. That's the biggest advantage of this digital. Faster turnarounds and increased profitability. Now you'll see I put this right last because I believe everything else has to fall in place, and then profitability will increase as long as we do things the right way. And that's the basis of this alliance. So let me show you what we're going to do starting in the next few weeks. Our model printer is on the way. To close this digital link, you do need a model printer. You have to be able to print surgical guides in-house. You have to be able to do the models in-house because a lot of these cases we cannot do modelers. So this $100,000 piece of machinery is on the way to us right now. But it will help us to close that link and be able to do these models inside. And let me show you what we can do with that. So I got caught with my pants down a little bit by InSequence. Now InSequence is a lab out west, I believe, that came up with an ingenious way to do fixed hybrids. We used to go to Dr. Rebai's office, and I used to stand chairside, put the implants in, I'll cut the denture, we'll do the conversion. 4.5 hours later, we're going crazy, the patient's upset because all of that is now digitally. Everything is done preoperatively. Now what it allowed us to do is wake up, because I lost all the conversion business I used to have. Let me tell you, doing a chairside conversion is not the type of thing you want to do on a Monday. So I wasn't too upset with losing it. But what I realized was, if you're not going to stay abreast, other people are going to overtake you. So we just signed with 360 Imaging. And what this allows us to do is help you plan surgical cases. So what this company has, they have radiologists, they have surgeons, they have clinicians on staff. And they help through the software planning where to place the implant. Now, they do all the work preoperatively. We sit down over lunchtime and we discuss the case. You tell me, I like the implant there, I don't like the implant there, this is what I would like to do. And from that point on, we print your guides in-house. The difference is, it doesn't have to go to Belgium anymore. It doesn't cost $450, $490. And if you look at Materialize, I think, Dr. Gazi, you said that they just lowered their pricing. And the reason for this is, most of this technology is coming in-house. Now, if you look at some of the companies, it's still closed architecture. You can't mill or print one of these guides if you don't have an STL file. Within the next 6 to 8 months, I think you're going to see a lot of these companies opening up. So if you do have a patient where normally you wouldn't have done guided surgery, these guides plus the planning, I think is sub $300. And it's just as accurate. We work off DICOM data, everything you have in your, but the difference is we own the file. The surgeon places the implant plus the lab owns this file. And that's going to help us do do this more effectively. And then we have Web Connect. You're going to come in. We are the master site for the software. The software is about $12,000 out of the gate. There's no reason for you to own $12,000 worth of software that you're going to use twice a month or once a year. You give us the DICOM data, we clean it up, we place the implant with you, and we print the guides. And that's kind of where the future is going of dentistry. A lot of these things that used to be outsourced, used to be shipped off abroad, is different. So let's look at this. Ortho aligners. There's a few companies out there doing these ortho aligners, and obviously these are for smaller cases. We're not orthodontists. 3Shape just launched their ortho analyzer. So if you have a case where you need aligners, you digitize the case, you send it to Absolute, it goes through the process. We have orthodontists we work with, and we plan the case. We analyze the case, and then the software sequences this. Now, by the time it sequences, we go on 3Shape Communicate, we talk about the case, we talk about the planning going through, and that's when we print the models and we do the suck downs. Now, effectively, there's about a 30 to 40% savings above some of the national market and competitors with this. So a lot of this technology is coming in-house. Absolute's going to be offering this starting mid-December, that and printing guides. So here's a quick demo of what the ortho analyzer works, and I think in this case they're changing number 10, I believe it was. And you can see the sequencing. Music's a little better on this one. So it's small increments. The software is set to move a tooth only that much. We're busy with Dr. Wainwright and Dr. Fritz to do some pre-market tests. But that's some of the interesting stuff that's going to come with this. So let's talk about zirconia a little bit. Zirconia is the material that links all this digital technology together. Now, you got to remember, when we digitally design, we don't want to go back to hand waxing, casting, pressing. Everything has to flow into our milling units, and we have to be able to mill that crown effectively, both aesthetically, strong, and with great marginal fit. So when we launched Envision about 8 months ago, not sure if Dr. Steed is here, I called him one day. I said, we just found the best material I've ever seen in my whole life. And about 6 months later, he called me, and we were talking about this, and he said, Conrad, I've never known you as a salesman, but that was the first time in my life I thought you were selling me. I was so excited. Drew was so excited with this material we found because it gave us great aesthetics, 700 megapascals worth of shear strength, almost double the strength of Emax. And we are comparable monolithic Emax with monolithic zirconia with layered Emax. Now, if you have a minute on your way out, at the Absolute table, we did a case 6 to 11 with Envision monolithic and layered Emax. And I dare you to tell me which one is which. 80% of the people picked the wrong one as Emax. That's how good this material is. So we're really excited about it. So what we did is we kind of threw the baby out with the bathwater. We got rid of our Adzor line, which is our high-strength zirconia. And we didn't realize that there's a very good use for high-strength zirconia as well as the premium translucent zirconia. So high-strength zirconia is about 1,200 megapascals. Premium line zirconia is about 700. Now, what we do, the difference is bridge work is where we use the high strength. Anterior cases up to 3-unit bridges is where we use Envision. Now, the advantage of this material, it's a millable material, so we can use it. So I did this with Dr. Leach, and Dr. Ferro was one of the guys who told me one day, you told us this material looks much better, and that was the old style zirconia. Every generation was a little bit better, but we always ended up with this bright white shiny crowns in the mouth, and that's what we were able to eradicate now with our Envision line. It's all about light absorption, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit and why that makes such a difference. So if you look at these three crowns are actually on the table back there, and before you go, stop by and look at it. This is Emax monolithic. We have Adzor or Bruxer monolithic, and then on the right side we have Envision. Now all three of these crowns are monolithic, no layering, and you can actually see on these lingual cusps how the light gets absorbed into this material. And it truly makes that natural transition when you look at the material. So 700 megapascals, 1200 megapascals, 390 or 400 megapascals, depending on what you read. So if we could find a material that has the aesthetics of Emax, but the strength of zirconia, that was the ideal material. And I think we're very close, or we have found that. So look at the difference between a Bruxelles crown and an Envision crown, cut from the same file. Now you got to remember, the stronger one is brighter, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit. So look at the microstructure of zirconia, and look at the microstructure of Emax. So why don't we prefer to mill Emax versus zirconia? Zirconia gets milled in the green state, which means in the chalk state. That gives us the ability to cut these margins much finer than what we can if we cut Emax in the blue phase, in the blue block phase. The reason for this is the crystalline structure. When you look at the bonding of these crystals, as soon as the burr cuts them, the crystals tear out, and that's when you get that raggedy edge. And that's the difference between milling zirconia or milling something in a crystalline state. Now, you can also see why Emax is such a great material for light absorption is because of the difference in the depth in this microstructure. Now, let me show you why zirconia was so tough to work with aesthetically up to this point. If you look at the microstructure of zirconia, you have areas where there's zirconium oxide caught within the matrix. Zirconium oxide is white, which means the light gets reflected out of the surface. When you go to trade shows, next time you go to a trade show, you're going to think of me. You'll always see these salesmen standing there with a little flashlight and a coping on top of it, and they all argue about whose zirconia is more translucent than the guy next to it. It has nothing to do with translucency. It has everything to do with light absorption. When we can get a material to absorb the light, we can lower the value. When a material reflects the light, it increases the value. So what zirconia does, when the light goes into this matrix, it hits the oxide inside the matrix and comes straight out. And that's why zirconia always, up to this point, has looked so artificial, because it reflects that light. If you look at the new line of zirconia, the matrix particles are all the same size. If you can create same size particles, you have no room for oxide in between it. The oxide, unfortunately, makes it stronger. But if you look at a matrix like this, it will now absorb the light instead of reflect it. And that's where Envision is such a great material. Less oxide, more light absorption. Not translucency, but absorption. And that's why this material is such a good... so there's the case, and we have this case out here as well. If you should choose, and think about one of these materials are layered Emax, and the other is monolithic zirconia. Most people choose that the other way around. It truly is a really spectacular material. So we can now do full rehabs, completely monolithic. We can layer the facials if we need to. If we need a little translucency on the edge, we can do a slight cutback. But it is truly an amazing material. So, like I said, 650 to 700, depending on what material we use in our Envision line. And look at the differences when we do a case now where we have implants involved with this. This was right in the beginning, so we still did, this was Dr. David Hedgeco down in Fayetteville. We did incisors out of Emax layered, and we then went with our Envision line and then our high-strength zirconia at the back. But you see the transition now is becoming much better than what we used to have. So look at what we can do now with zirconia. And this is where digital impressions is also becoming a little bit more profitable. These two crowns were screw retained. So what we did with those crowns were monolithic zirconia, but we did it on a tie base. So if you have a regular posterior crown, the old way of doing it, or the traditional way of doing it, is CAD abutment, and then you do a crown cementable over it. We read more and more about periimplantitis, cement stuck subgingivally, and those kind of things. So what we can do now with our tie base is we have the connection, and we can now go into our digital software, and we can design our crown on that tie base, which means we're milling a zirconia crown onto a tie base that is now 3 times as strong as what we would have had, or twice as strong as what we would have had if we did it with Emax. So we can now do these cases. A screw retained case, we have the option to do it with Emax, we have the option to do it with Envision or Adzer. So if you need a high strength application, you can do a screw retained crown out of either of those, or any three of those materials. So let me show you the difference. So we did a case with Dr. Laura Tawil, and I asked her, we want to do 3 crowns, and I want the patient to choose which one is the best. So the difference in materials, 400 megapascals, 1200, or 700. We cut 3 crowns. I went there on a Tuesday morning. We placed, hand-tightened 3 crowns. In 15 minutes, I took pictures and I was out of there. So very quick, very efficient delivery. That's our Adzor crown, 12 to 1500 megapascals. We had an Emax crown at 450, 390 to 450. And then we had our Envision crown at 700. Now, obviously, there's a big difference between the high-strength zirconia. But look how close these two are together. The difference is you have twice the shear strength in this than you have in that. The price on this, $200 cheaper than a cementable crown on a CAD abutment. If you do 5 of these in a month, posterior crowns, you've just paid for your digital equipment. So that's where the difference in this technology comes in, and that's what helped. And you can see we had a very good result. So very easy, very predictable. Now, there's one problem with this material, and that's before it's seated, it has no strength. If you think about this, and Matt and myself had a few phone calls, people said, I will never do Envision again because I just had a crown crack at delivery and it snapped in half. When you place one of these crowns and it's not seated 100%, think about a pane of glass on a flat surface. You can drive a truck over that glass because the compressive strength is extremely high. Once you put a penny under it and you drive that same truck over, you crack it in half. That shear strength is very low until the crown is seated. So it's very important when we seat these crowns to make sure they're fully seated before the patient bites down. Any high point or any void that we had in the model will cause terminal failure. We must be about 2,000, 3,000 crowns into Envision. Orally, after cementation, Matt, any failures? 1 hand, if that much. So it's a very strong material, very aesthetic material, but if you do seat it, be very careful that it's seated 100% before you let the patient bite down. A PFM would crack a margin or chip a little area on the margin, you can polish it up. One of these crowns, that's what it looks like if it wasn't seated. That's not something to be concerned about. It's not that the material wouldn't hold up long-term in the mouth, but when we seat it, it's important to look at that. So some things are better left where they belong. And with Facebook, I told you I post these funny pictures on Facebook. Once in a while, pictures show up of me back in the day. So this shows up, and I've showed this a few times. And if those of you don't recognize the girl in front with the big hair, that was me in the 80s. And the girl behind me with the even bigger hair was my girlfriend in those days. So some things are better. Now, look at how Drew and I aged in the last 15 years. This is when we came to the States in 2000. Now, you can see the receding hairline, unfortunately, was already well underway by that time. So it's better to leave. Drew does look like a little boy. So every year at the conference, we have a donated case. We've had many surgeons, Dr. Rebai, Dr. Scuria did the first case, Amy Smile. And it's always noticeable when we donate these fixed hybrid cases, how hard it is to get those implants to integrate. When you have these cases that patients pay for, it seems that they hold up better. I think Amy lost about 4 implants. We redid the case a bunch of time, and Dr. Rebai and the guys at TIC did a great job. And then last year, we had Dr. McKenzie and Dr. Hamrick from Raleigh Imperial with Stuart Higgins that donated a case to Donna. And these were all uppers. So this year, before the conference, normally about 2-3 months before, I start doing the rounds looking for a surgeon and a prosthodontist to donate a case. So for some reason, nobody's answering their phones if I call September or October because they know I'm looking for a case. So this year I ended up at Dr. Godsey and Dr. Jeff Cunningham's door. And I will tell you, the great thing about both these gentlemen, they both thanked me twice to invite them to do this. And I really appreciate you guys. We found a very deserving patient. And Dr. Godsey is going to talk to us just a little bit about how we're going to treat this patient. So we're going to switch gears a little bit and and talk about what we can do for edentulous patients. Tonight is Dentsply's night, and they have a protocol called CONUS. Now, CONUS is right between a fixed hybrid and locator abutments. So if you have these patients that has 4 locators in the upper, they have fulcrum points, they're not happy with the stability, something like CONUS is an ideal treatment for that patient. So what is CONUS? CONUS is a custom abutment with a gold cap that slides onto this abutment and holds on by friction fit. There's no clip retention on CONUS, and it's a vertical retention. So what this allows us to do is if we don't have a very good AP spread, we can have 4 implants in the anterior zone and still get away with a denture that will not fulcrum on these implants. So a very good friction fit, and it has the feel of real teeth. It's cleansable, so sometimes when we have patients with a lot of bone loss in the anterior zone, in the sulcus area, you can't do a fixed hybrid because then we run into hygiene issues and overlap issues. So if you want a denture that has the removable function or the removable feature of a clip denture, you don't want to deal with the fulcrum point issues, and you want something with the feel of real teeth, that's a CONUS case. Now, CONUS is also very economical. So it's right between a clip bar, which is around about $4,200, and a locator case, which is about $1,500. Most cases, lab fee with 2 dentures, and we'll discuss that, about $2,500 lab bill. So it gives the patient something a little bit more affordable, but definitely something that feels like real teeth. And it's a very, very effective protocol when you have shallow spread. So let's look at what it is. What you need to do a CONUS is on average about 11 millimeters from the tissue. The silicone cap sits about 6 millimeters off the tissue, and then you need about 5 millimeters for your cobalt chrome partial and your components, your teeth on top of that. And we'll dissect this just a little bit and show you where we can go. So what's the restorative step? The first thing we do in the lab is make you a custom tray for an open tray impression. You go implant level at your first appointment and take us an impression that engages the palate and the vestibule. So as good an anatomical impression as possible. Remember, this is hybrid denture work and implant work. So you want to take an impression as if it's going to be a denture, but engaging the implants, if that makes sense. So we're going to make you a bite trim, and we'll go through this step by step. You take a standard bite, and you're going to do a verification of this bite. Lab stage, we're going to set up some teeth, and then you're going to do an aesthetic try-in. Within those parameters, we're going to create the CONUS abutments. We're going to do a final try-in. We're going to process the case, and we're going to deliver this chairside. Now, I'll make sense of this in a minute. Just wanted to give you a little rundown. So there's always such a thing as too much technology, and that's what we're trying to stay away from. So little Katie here has a very good example of when technology is slightly overused. And Dad was sitting there texting as Flutterby Fairy went straight past him, straight into the fire. So sometimes technology doesn't yield what we're looking for. Now, in cases like this, I will say the first 8 or 9 months of this process was daunting. It sounds like a very simple system. 4 implants, all parallel, with a friction fit denture over it. But we've learned a few things, and I'm going to try to highlight that for you. The first thing we try to do, if possible, is open tray impressions. And we try to tie them together inside our impression to make this as predictable as possible. Take a custom tray, border mold if you can, make sure we get a good palatal engagement and good frenums. Now from that point on, when you get this back, we'll make a little model verification jig to help you verify that the model and the impression is accurate. And we'll talk to you about this when you ever do one of these cases. So the first appointment, you have the patient, we have a bite trim, we do a tooth try-in, and anything we need to do at this point to change that position, we do at this stage. We want to make sure that everything is where it needs to be before we go and produce our conus abutments. So we need to get to the stage where the patient approves the denture and we can go ahead and process that denture and the patient will be happy. If anything is off midline incisal edge position, we go back and we reset the denture until we're sure that those parameters are right. So look at this case. My clinician placed these implants himself, put 7 implants in, read about fixed hybrids, but didn't read that you have to look at angulation and access of the screw channels. Because when we do a fixed hybrid, obviously we can have 7 implants all breaching the buccal corridor. So when we scanned the case after the tooth try-in, I sent this digital image to him and I said, what do you want to do? He said, well, I promised my patient a fixed hybrid. How do we make a fixed hybrid? I said, we're going to put 7 correction abutments on those implants at $250 a piece. And he said, well, that's not going to happen because that's my profit margin. Fortunately, in those days, we had conus, which gave us the ability to tell the patient it is a removable device, but it's going to give you the feel of real teeth. You got to remember that locators doesn't feel like real teeth because it's a clip attachment with a Teflon rider. Every time the patient functions, it has that feel. You don't get that with conus. Conus is bone-on-bone occlusion. It's tissue-borne and friction fit on the abutments. So when a patient functions on this, it feels like a fixed hybrid. On the lower, we didn't have any issues. We made a fixed hybrid bar, wrapped acrylic around that. So here you can see our final denture double scanned and our design of our abutments within those parameters. So something we've changed over the last few years is we set up the denture first, make sure we get patient approval, and then we do our substructure design inside the buccolingual parameters set by the denture. 15 years ago when I did Hader bars in the lab, I'd make a Hader bar, send it to the removables guys, and they'll say, I got no room for the teeth. I got paid, I didn't answer my phone, everybody was happy. Nowadays, we set the denture up and we do our design inside those parameters, giving us good structure support. So here's our conus abutments on the model. The ideal setup for conus is 4 abutments. You cannot do it in less than 4 abutments, but the ideal setup is 4 abutments. What makes this a great protocol is that you can have these 4 abutments in the anterior zone. If we have abutments in first bicuspids and in the incisor position, it makes for a great case. It doesn't sound like a good spread, but those cases are extremely stable, which helps us with patients who doesn't have a lot of bone, and we mostly have that bone in the anterior. Now, if you look at the cap gives us the ability to process inside the denture. This is the conus mating surface. That is not, that is a fixed value. It's a milled surface where this cap is machined to go over. You have about 1 millimeter from the tissue height, and that's where your abutment margin is set. So these caps are supragingival. Now you have to remember, you cannot go subgingival with conus because it cannot have any tissue pressure around these caps. If the cap is not seated 100%, there's 0 friction fit, which means 0 retention. So that's why the abutments has to be supragingival. And this means that if we don't have enough vertical clearance, if we don't have the 11 millimeters, conus is not a good option. It's very few patients that doesn't offer 11 millimeters, but in this case, it's an absolute must. Then you can see the coping slides over this mating surface, and that's where the friction fit comes in. Now, this principle was designed almost 15 years ago in Germany with the Syncone system, where they cast these by hand, put them in dentures. The problem was that we couldn't get the abutments all parallel. What's really great with this is that all the abutments are cut to exactly 5-degree taper. So there's no wear on the system. If you place a conus case today and all the abutments are drawing in the right 5-degree, you will realistically, in 10 years, never have to replace those caps. The reason for this is, if you look at the top of the conus cap, they left about 0.75 millimeters of clearance between the top of the cap and the abutment. And that allows this cap to seat further down as the patient functions. So the more the patient functions on conus, the more retention you get. The case settles in, the gold stretches, and that's when the case really becomes a valuable asset to have. So what we do is we cast a cobalt chrome frame to support this. Now what you don't want to do is have 4 stiletto heels pushing into this denture. Every time the patient functions, that's where it cracks. So you'll see our cobalt chrome rests on top of the conus caps. When the patient functions, the spread is sideways and into the cobalt chrome. So it's a very solid makeup. Now here's our try-in. At try-in stage, what we do is we process the caps into the denture so that we can deliver the abutments and have an actual definitive try-in before we go to our processing. The abutments in place, and now what we need to do is we need to transfer these abutments to the mouth. Now what you got to remember, the problem with conus is it's completely conical. So our positioning jigs has no way to index these abutments. Now this is we found out the hard way. The first case we did, actually the second case we did, the clinician called me and said, I walked into the operatory, my assistant took everything off the model, put it on the tray, and somebody walked by and bumped it. So we had 8 abutments completely scattered. To tell you how big a problem this is, we ended up throwing away 8 abutments and remilling them. If one abutment is out of position, the 5-degree draw becomes a 10-degree draw, which means you get a binding coping. These abutments all look exactly the same. We sat there, Brenda sat there for a few hours trying to match these abutments up with our milling files. There's no way to mill this or to match it up. So what we do now is we take a little black marker, we write the tooth number on it, and at the top of these jigs, we draw a cross across the top platform, the top incisal platform of the abutment. Now think about this. This system was designed for EV. If you work on Dentsply EV, the hex has an anti-rotational feature in that makes an abutment only seat in one position. So any CAD abutment milled for an EV system, for the Dentsply EV system, will only position in one position, which makes this problem obsolete. But when you do this on any other system, and this system is available for any implant that you can take an implant level impression, except spline. Spline is probably the only system out there where we can do absolutely nothing with except the stock abutments. So it's available on all the systems and that integration. So you can see that, whoa, Russ, that's a problem. Fortunately, we have our IT guy right on hand, so that's not going to be a problem. So you can see our rotations, our abutments are placed, torque down, and now we go to the mouth with our denture, make sure that everything seats, and we do our definitive try-in. So now we have our abutments in place, we make sure the rotation is right, everything matched up with the model, and we position our denture. Now, we found that if the abutments are out of position by just a little bit, small model discrepancies, anything like that, we change the way these dentures seat. The caps have to be fully integrated to seat. So what we do now is we chairside pick up these caps at final delivery. We'll process the denture and we'll give the denture to you with open areas inside so you can pick this up chairside. So the 3 ways we do this: complete or non-integrated copings. If we have a case where we have a problem with one of them, we'll leave one of them out, and in some of these cases, we'll process everything. So if the try-in goes well, we'll process all 4 the caps, and you'll deliver the case finally. If we're not sure on the process, we'll leave it open, and you'll pick these up chairside before you deliver the denture. So we'll use a little post-am. Atlantis now has post-ams that snaps over these abutments, and it covers quite a large part of the tissue. So when you pick it up, it gives you a very smooth transition in your denture. So very easy to do this chairside. To me, that's still the favorite way to do this, is pick the denture up chairside. Now, if you look at our patient here, we had a very shallow spread on this, but it still had the feel of real teeth. So you have tissue support at the back. It's tissue-borne, but on the front you have the vertical retention that's not clip fit, but friction fit. So when the patient functions, they cannot sense that the denture is moving. Now what we do is, because we have full vestibules, if we choose so, we don't want these patients to sleep and have these abutments cut the tongue. So we deliver 2 dentures with this case. We do a sleep denture, which they use at night, which is completely high water and lets the tissue relax. The problem with these caps are we're looking at about $120 a piece for one of these gold caps. So when we do a sleep denture, we're $500 into gold caps before we set a tooth to wax. So we started doing a sleep denture that the acrylic integrates with the abutments. And we found these to work extremely well. Now, these dentures are less than $150, which makes the case or keeps the case pretty affordable. And that's where the $2,500 price tag comes from. So what we do is we'll build little copings around these abutments, and then we process our denture onto these copings. So it's a pure friction fit. And we obviously have no extensions, no distal extensions on these. We try to keep things as short and as hygienic as possible. So patients enjoy these so much that they start eating on them. This specific patient broke this denture twice. Second time, he gave me a personal phone call and wanted to know what's wrong with the denture. So when I got it back, and I obviously apologized profusely, I opened the denture up, and under my microscope, there was a clear piece of chicken stuck in this crack line. So we realized this patient enjoys the sleep denture so much that he was wearing it all day long. And obviously we didn't honor that warranty. So what we do now, because when this denture fractures, it's very tough to get a new denture because we have to take new impressions from scratch. So we're working on digitizing our conus cases. Once we have the conus digitized, we can now mold these dentures out of PMMA, which means if that patient would break the denture down the line, you make a phone call, we cut a new PMMA denture, patient shows up at the office, and you give him the denture. And that's where our industry is going to. It's going to be impressionless remakes going forward. Now, this technology is about 85% there. Dries is still having some issues cutting all the flanges back. But within the next 5 to 6 months, we believe we'll be able to do these dentures with PMMA. So our problem was we couldn't get the denture out. This was one of the first cases we did. And we realized that the abutments were milled to 4-degree taper. And 4-degree taper ended up being a little bit too much. So what we came up with was over festoon round about the first bicuspid area. And we had to get a way for these patients to hook the denture to just release the friction fit. Because it's almost like a cold weld. And that makes this such a good protocol because it really stays in the mouth. So I'm in Home Depot one day, and I see these paint can openers. And if I'm not anything, I am honest, and I will admit to this. So I see these paint can openers in one of these big orange buckets, and I'm thinking to myself, now I can make some serious money out of this bucket. So I asked the guy, are these things, do you have to buy them? He says, you just have to buy paint. So I get a quart of paint, is it a quart? And I take a whole handful of these paint can openers. So I go back to the lab, we put it under the lathe, polish them up. I write Absolute Dental Services, we put a little tooth on the back, and we sell them for $55, which I thought was a pretty good deal because you didn't have to do anything. So about 2 weeks later, Dr. Wilhelm calls me. He goes, yeah, I just want to let you know your paint can opener's not working so well. I'm like, those things are hand-casted by authentic artists in my lab. He said, let me tell you how I know it's paint can openers, because they're rusting. So that idea only lasted about 2 months. We are now casting these with cobalt chrome, and I promise you they are authentically hand-created from now on. And we make no money off them anymore because they're still $55. But it really helps our patients to get. So this is the first time we delivered this little device to our patient and asked him to see if he can use it.
Just said it in the good ones.
Take 2.
There it is.
Ta-da.
So paint can openers or not, these dentures have amazing retention. Now, if you compare that to something like a locator case, it really makes a difference. So we can also do partials with this. We can do small cases. And I could never really figure out where would you do a partial, 3 or 4 teeth. Look at this case. And if we had conus in this case, it would have been ideal. We had to recorrect for angulation. And the patient had a lot of bone loss on the facial. So we ended up correcting, but we ended up very high vertically, so a very thick prosthesis. It's cemented, or it's screw retained, so now there's a lot of maintenance on this. So this would be the ideal case for conus. So when we do a case like this, where we do a partial, obviously you have to be careful not to make them too small, because if the patient aspirates it, that's a whole different ballgame. So we try to stay within 4 teeth, maybe 3, if we're going to do something like this. So conus abutments in, And now what we do is we cement these cases on top of these abutments. And that's a whole different story. I'm not going to get into that tonight. But it gives you a very good option to give a patient a small removable device without clasping it. So you don't have anything in the palate, you don't have any clasps on the molars, and you have the same amount of stability that you would in a cobalt chrome. Now if you look at the lingual, there's a little bit of a surface still left there. We process that with a lingual plate, so when you reline, you can push this denture down into the palate and be sure you're in the right seating position. But if you ever want to do one of these cases, give us a call, we'll walk you through it. But very, very effective. Now what we can do on this as well is make a substructure, layer porcelain, and then cement the copings into the substructure that then friction fits onto the, so we can actually make a porcelain structure that goes into it. We can also do it with zirconia. So what have we learned? This slide has cost half my hair, so I hope you appreciate me sharing this with you. If we do 2 implants, 3 to 4 units. More implants than that becomes too much retention. 3 implants, 6 to 7, and 4 implants is ideal for a full arch. 4 implants, we process the copings directly, lab side, or indirectly I should say, and 5 or more implants, we ask that the clinicians pick it up chair side. And we're always there to help you with this as well. Straight implant placement is very important from our surgeons. So to give our surgeons a guide or a denture with a lingual cutout helps us. The more we have to correct for angulation, the higher the abutments comes up, the more vertical clearance you need. The implants doesn't have to go straight up and down as long as they all go in the same direction. We can correct up to 30 degrees with conus, but it's a combined 30 degrees. So if your implants are like this, you can only go 30 degrees and the rest would lift up. So straight implant placement is important. Angulation correction will increase our vertical, lack of retention. So when we have a lack of retention, the problem is that conus is like my golf game. The more I hit the golf ball that way, the more I aim this way, the more the ball goes that way. So we figured out that if you have too much retention, the first thing you want to do is take the abutment and cut it. So if you cut this abutment or go round and round this abutment, what you're allowing the coping to do is seat even further. The more the coping seats, the more retention you get. So if you think about conus, and this is probably the best way to explain the system, the retention is 360 degrees. The coping engages the axial walls at 360 degrees. If you have a 360 degree engagement, it's maximum retention. So the more you make your abutment smaller, the more the coping seats, the more retention you gain. So what do we do if we want to make less retention? On the side of this abutment is our access hole. Now if you reduce an axial wall from gingival to occlusal, what you're doing is you're making the coping hold on to less of the abutment. And that's the way you reduce retention on conus. You grind the abutment from gingival to occlusal and decrease the axial wall engagement. So what we did in the beginning was go in and ream the copings out a little bit. But what we didn't realize was the copings were just getting more and more retention. And then binding of the denture, relieve that axial wall and make it less retentive. Custom mold CAD copings will bind. So what we tried was to try to cut out Dentsply out of their $120 profit margins, mold these copings with titanium. Unfortunately, titanium to titanium binds. It doesn't come out. So there's no shortcut. The only way conus works is if you use the real gold copings. And then open tray impression copings makes this much easier. So we asked our patient to give us a last word, and this is what he gave us.
Okay. Solid.
So very solid system, and he came in afterwards and said he actually likes the upper more than he does the lower. So we got about 5 minutes left. If there's any questions on this, I know you guys are getting tired of listening to my foreign accent. What is the optimal clearance for conus? About 15 millimeters. If you have 15 millimeters from tissue to opposing dentition, that's the optimal clearance to do a conus case. So we have a protocol manual on this, and I want to end tonight with our absolute favorite prosthesis, the one we do in the lab that we're the proudest of, one that you see on a lot of these posters out here, and that's cobalt chrome fixed hybrids. So we now have the ability to cut our fixed hybrids out of a cobalt chrome substructure and then layer porcelain directly onto that. There is not one case that we deliver out of our lab consistently with the aesthetics that one of these cases offers. So in about 5 minutes, I'm going to walk you through the process of doing a fixed hybrid. And I know when you listen to the word fixed hybrid, it sounds like a daunting task. It is the most predictable protocol that we have clinically today. Every single case we've done has been a success, touch wood. Out of about 1,200 fixed hybrids, every time I say this, I think about if it's true. Out of 1,200 fixed hybrids, we have not lost one case due to implant failure. And the reason is because the bar ties these implants together as one unit. So if you have 4 implants in the upper and it's 5 by 10, it becomes 200 square millimeters of integration. And that's why you can load an upper arch on 4 implants with great success. About 80% of the fixed hybrids we've done have been on 4 implants, and we've had great success. So where we start is an implant level impression, tie the copings together, we go to the lab, pour our model, make a bite rim, and remember, this is a hybrid between removable dentistry and crown and bridge. So when we take the impression, once again, we want to make sure we have a good palate and good vestibule engagement on that impression. We send that back. You take a normal bite like you always do. And remember, again, I have a protocol manual for this. If you're ever interested in doing one, just let me know. We can send it to you digitally or have a drop-off. We make a verification jig to make sure that the model and the mouth matches up. So every step we take, we build in a security measure. We make sure that nothing comes back at the end and gives us any problems. Go back to the lab, we do a normal setup, and this is normal removable dentistry. Comes back to you, you're going to do a tooth try-in like you would for a denture, and in some cases, if we don't have a lot of vestibule or we don't have a good palate, we'll engage it with 1 or 2 implants through the denture. That way you can screw your tooth try-in in. We do it on a process base, and you can make sure that your patient is happy. Now the results we're looking for is not always those patients who doesn't know what they want, but the patients who do know what they want. And this is facetious, but it's very important. At this stage, whatever this patient approves is what we're going to give you back exactly. There's going to be no difference between this denture and your fixed hybrid, which means the day you deliver your final, you are not going to do any adjustments. So, and I promise you, I got 5 minutes. I'm going to get you out of here. So I want to talk about just one of these fixed hybrids tonight, and that's the cobalt chrome fixed hybrid that we do through ISIS. And you can see the exceptional results that we're achieving with this. The problem for us has always been when we do a wrapped acrylic hybrid, it looks like a denture that somebody just paid $20,000 for. When you deliver one of these fixed hybrids and our artists fabricate this, it truly is those cases that you can publish. We can do metal occlusals, but it's very, very predictable. So here's a case we did with Dr. David Hedgeko and Gary Jones in Fayetteville, complete last case. We make a denture from the start, make sure the patient approves that denture. We do a cutout, and when we do our surgery, we make sure that we have access to the lingual of the buccal corridor. We make sure that we don't have any issues when it comes to our final. We then do a tooth try-in, and these tooth try-ins are sometimes based on the implants. And we make sure that the patient approves. Now, once we get that denture try-in, we give this to Matt, and he creates an exact copy of this denture support structure. Now, why cobalt chrome is such a predictable protocol is because every support structure is exactly where it needs to be. Not close, not estimated, but exactly. So there's 0 unsupported porcelain on one of these cases. Touch wood, again, we have never had porcelain fracture. It's probably going to happen on Monday, but we've never had a cobalt chrome fracture porcelain. Now, let's say it does fracture porcelain. What are we going to do? You keep the denture, you keep the initial denture or the temporary denture, you unscrew the prosthesis, and you send it back to the lab. We're going to cut that tooth and make a cementable crown over that. So for you, after delivery, you as the clinician, after delivery, there is almost 0 maintenance on these cases. If anything goes wrong, we fix it. Chest side or lab side, we get it back, and you put it back in the mouth. So very predictable. It's not one of those cases that's going to give you a lot of trouble down the line. So if you look at our process, layered cobalt chrome, and what our technicians like about this is we're working with high fusing porcelain. It's porcelains that we've known for the last 30 years, very predictable, aesthetically exceptional results. This patient, from where we started to where we delivered, you couldn't ask for a better result. You cannot achieve this with acrylic teeth. And the biggest problem we have with acrylics is that 7 through 10, the patients have no idea how hard they're biting on these things and snap those teeth right off. So this is something that gives us a little bit more prediction. So this is a case we did with Dr. John Murrell. Dr. John, I asked him for slides on this for about 6 months, and he gave me the slides yesterday. So thank you for that, Dr. John. I cut these in just before we started. I'm just kidding. It's a great case we did. Patient was a denture. Dr. John, I'm not sure if I'm doing this right, but I had a denture for a long time on locators. There was really no other option in those days. And you can see, because of the flare of these locators, it's, I hope that's on my phone. Because of the flare of this locators, you have a lot of maintenance on this. The denture was really thin and started cracking. The thing was that the patient really liked. Are they looking for me? I think we only had the room till 8:30, so they're probably wanting us to leave. So you can see the denture was extremely thin at the back. We made a denture that the patient approved. We worked out phonetics, vertical. Dr. John gave us everything we needed this case so that we could replicate that back in. So when we mount our case, it's mounted off something that we know works in the patient. We make an incisal index. From that incisal index, we now design our cobalt chrome. In this case, we had almost 0 vertical clearance at the back. I think we ended up with 5 millimeters.
5 millimeters from implant platform to opposing.
Yeah, so we had 5 millimeters from implant platform to opposing occlusion. I think the prosthesis ended up being 2 millimeters, 2.5 millimeters, something like that. Is that about right? So when we delivered, there's a slide that Dr. John sent us, and you can see even after delivery how much occlusal adjustments was needed. You cannot do this with a wrapped acrylic, and you sure cannot do this with a zirconia frame. So it's the ultimate aesthetic and strength prosthesis that we can deliver. Now, one thing I want to show you, there's our final result, but what's more important, this patient loved their denture. And if you look at the animation, that was the original denture, and look how close we were able to get to our final delivery. Almost no difference in aesthetics. And that's the predictability in one of these cobalt chromes. Once that denture is set up, we have the incisal index, we can guarantee you what we're going to deliver. So 2 more slides. What's new at Absolute? If you guys are tired trying to get us on the line to check on a case, last year I stood here and I said we're going to have this feature. I will tell you, implementing a new database into a business is borderline suicide. And let me also tell you, if you ever buy a database and they tell you, oh, this is going to be easy, it's not, and it's expensive when they say it's cheap, but I can tell you we are integrated, we are ready to go. So we now have a client portal on our website. So if you go to absolutedentallab.com, you can log in and go into our system and track your own cases. So your assistant can keep the software open during the day. She can schedule pickups. As soon as she schedules a pickup, it knows where it's coming from. The email goes to every driver, front desk, Jay, Russ, and Karina. So 6 people get this, and we're ready with the pickup. You can also look at your accounting, your payments, and then you can reschedule a case. So let me go back one. So what the slide looks like where your cases are. So you can look at John Ballard, scheduled delivery 11/17 at 11 a.m. So now you know that's the guaranteed time this will be there. Status is scheduled. It means it's on track. There's no issues. Now, if you need to reschedule this and you want to do this real quick, you click on John Ballard and it opens up the case. And what you can say is, patients going out of town, getting married on Saturday, can you please expedite this case? It will come straight into our system and you will get an email confirmation that the case has been rescheduled. That way it's quick, fast, and efficient. And your front desk can actually keep this open, running all day, click it, and make the changes as needed. If you're interested in this, just mark your cards. Russ will be in contact. We'll set it up with your own username and password. And then one last thing. Out of necessity, we started Absolute Removables about 2 years ago. We had a great team, very experienced technician, and because of some family issues on a Tuesday night, she decided she is no longer part of our family, and we ended up with 4 people in our removals department, super talented, but very inexperienced. And for the last 6 months, Matt, me, Drew, and Stephen have tried to keep our removal section alive. I think aesthetically we did great, but we missed a few things, and I want to apologize for that. We are so fortunate. After 6 months of looking, we found Henry Fourie, another South African I apologize for, who has 25 years specialized experience in removable dentistry. He's not a crown and bridge technician. He only does removals. I didn't know it even existed. So Henry, we are so happy to have you on our team. Once again, we know going forward we're going to give you exceptional products with this guy on our team. 25 years experience. So if you want to give us a chance, you want to show what we can do, we'll appreciate it. So to say thank you tonight, without Lisa Stecker, our meeting coordinator, this would not have happened. Lisa almost beat me up 3 times this week, and all I did was look at her. So it was very stressful. Lisa, are you here? She's not even here anymore. There she is. Lisa, thank you so much. And then, we have Russell Davis right here. He's our IT guy, flawless IT work. Russell told me this morning, I have no idea if all of this stuff is going to work, but it worked great. And then Karina, Lori, Jane, Bobby, Trisha, Jason, Chad, Lindsay. We could not do these meetings without you. I would like to end tonight and say thank you to every single one of you. You are part of our family. Besides Drew and I, we're the only family we have in the U.S. You've accepted us into your community. We are so proud to be a part of the dentistry in the Triangle. And I truly appreciate you supporting these meetings every year, and I hope you found it useful, helpful, and a little funny. Thank you so much.